FNaF 3 has often been assumed to take place in 2023. It's been the common consensus for years. But over the last year or so, this has been brought into question, with many people arguing that we've been wrong for almost 10 years. So, have we? That's what I want to find out today. Everyone seems to be talking about FNaF 3 and FNaF 6 timelines placement recently, so I thought I would too. I didn't want to make this video for a few months, but then I realized that Return to the Pit, an interactive novel adaptation of the adaptation of Into the Pit, could confirm this, depending on if it has an interesting Easter egg from the game. That book comes out on December 24th, but it's probably going to get leaked a few weeks before that, so I have to get this video out very quickly if I actually want to speculate about it and not just repeat what the book implies. There are 3 possible years for when FNaF 3 takes place, and FNaF 6 too, I guess. 2015, 2017, and 2023. It has to be these years in particular because they each take place 30 years after the closure of a Freddy's. Well, I guess there's 2013 too, 30 years after the bite of 83, but that was Fredbear's, so I doubt it, since FNaF 3's Steam description specifies it's been 30 years after the closure of a Freddy's, not Fredbear's. I'm going to go over the evidence for each theory, and then we'll make a final decision together. 2023 is the most popular date for when FNaF 3 takes place, and especially FNaF 6. Oh, and by the way, when I say 2023, I really mean 30 years after FNaF 1. I know there are multiple theories for when FNaF 1 takes place, I'm just saying 2023 for simplicity's sake. The evidence for 2023 is that Fazbear's Fright seems to be celebrating Freddy's as a whole, not just focusing on one location, so it makes sense for it to be after the closure of the last Freddy's, because that was like the last one. An additional piece of evidence is a FNaF 3 teaser, which in the source code says, 5 Nights at Freddy's, 30 years later, only one, which could mean it's 30 years after 5 Nights at Freddy's. Although if I'm being honest, I don't think this is great evidence. This can easily be interpreted as just saying the series' name, then that this game is going to be 30 years after something, and then setting up Springtrap. Other evidence is that Scott said FNaF 3's story was basically almost completely solved by the time of FNaF 4, and at the time, everyone thought the game took place in 2023. Another piece of evidence comes from FNaF 6, where Henry's audio log is labeled HRY223. Henry 223. 223 may mean 2023, although some people call out that 223 wouldn't be how you label a year. You would say 23 or 2023, and that's all the evidence for 2023 that I can think of. 2015 is the second most popular date. Evidence is that it makes sense for Fazbear's Fright to be 30 years after the closure of the first Freddy's, since that's where all the rumors would have started. Additionally, this game came out in 2015. Scott could have set the MCI, and thus the closure of the first Freddy's in 1985, so FNaF 3 can take place the same year it came out. Additionally, in the logbook, there is the real value code. I don't want to get into it all right now, all the inflation stuff, but if you believe FNaF 1 is in 1992, the real value of the coupons line up with 2015. I recommend watching Gibby's video on when FNaF 3 takes place for a more in-depth explanation. And that is all the evidence for 2015 that I know of. If I forgot like a huge piece of evidence, please let me know. Hey guys, editor's note here. So I was editing the video and I actually found a new piece of evidence for 2015. It's heavily implied that FNaF 6 takes place around Halloween. And in the novels, Charlie dies on Halloween, so it's very likely that the FNaF 6 fire happens on the anniversary of Charlie's death. So I was curious and I want to see what year's Halloween fell on a Saturday, since that's when the FNaF 6 fire happens. And you'll never believe what one of the years was. 2015. This is very good evidence. I haven't seen anyone talk about it, so I want to throw it in here. So yeah, back to the video. 2017 is my personal favorite year for FNaF 3, just because I like the way the year looks, but we can't just believe things because we find them satisfying. Trust me, I know. So let's get into the evidence. The evidence, again, comes from the logbook. If you do the same thing with the real value code but believe 1993 is when FNaF 1 takes place, you get 2017, the same year the logbook came out. Some people actually use this evidence for 2023, saying that of course it's 2017. Scott can't predict what the real value will be in 6 years. Another piece of evidence comes from FNaF 2. The wording on the newspaper is very similar to the wording of the FNaF 3 Steam description. Also, FNaF 3 has a strange focus on FNaF 2. The office has a box filled with the toy animatronics and Withered Foxy's hook. In 5 out of 6 of the Happiest Day minigames, which plays a character introduced in FNaF 2, the paper pals from FNaF 2 can show up as Easter eggs in the office, but to be fair, so can the FNaF 1 cupcake. And furthermore, all the phantoms except for Chica are based on FNaF 2. With all the evidence for each year's out of the way, which one do I believe? Well, it's tricky since they all have pretty decent evidence, but I think I lean towards 2023. Mainly because of HRY223. Does 223 mean 2023 in universe? Probably not. But Scott still chose those numbers knowing 2023 was the most commonly believed date for FNaF 3, so he chose it for a reason. I very much doubt it was a coincidence. So does this mean FNaF 6 is in 2023? Probably. So FNaF 3 and 6 are in 2023, right? That's what I would be saying if it wasn't for the most recent FNaF game, Into the Pit. You see, this game is implied to take place in 2020 or 2021. Since the scrapped Jeff's Pizza ARG, which has actually never been officially scrapped, but it hasn't come out yet, so it probably is never going to. Jeff made a post in October 2020. This game was seemingly originally going to take place in October, since the date on the calendar was originally labeled October 27th. This is weird though, since the first cutscene of the game, Oswald talks about school starting the next day and how his happy summer is almost over. But I also think it would be strange to have the calendar in the trailer be completely different from the game just for reference to the movie, so I don't know. The point is the game is in 2023 probably, maybe 2021. And this makes sense with FNaF 3 being in 2023, because Jeff's Pizza is filled with drawings from Fazbear's Fright, which implies the Fright crew hasn't taken them yet. Also, the room where the kids die is boarded up, and in the game, this is a party room, but it's probably supposed to be the safe room. And we know the Fright crew went to Freddy's after the safe room was boarded up, which implies they have not been there yet since it's still boarded up. And also, Oswald doesn't know about Freddy's before he goes back to 1985, which implies there hasn't been a location open for years. Trash in the Gang is also still in the dumpster, and Mike gets them in FPS from Dumpster Divers Weekly. So, case closed, right? Well, no, because of another Easter egg in the game, the Stitch Wraith. He can appear outside Oswald's window in the modern day. And here's the problem. The Stitch Wraith cannot exist before FNaF 6. So what's going on here? Is this just a random Easter egg? Maybe Megacat can help us out. I would just use critical thinking. Wait, what? This doesn't help us at all. Using critical thinking, the Stitch Wraith should be important. He's the central character of Frights, which this game is a celebration of, and we know that the Easter eggs were approved by Scott, so he had to have approved the Stitch Wraith knowing the lore implications of it existing in 2020. But what about the things that imply it's before FNaF 3? Logically, those should matter too, there's so many of them. So which one matters the most? And honestly, I have no idea. Into the Pit has broken the timeline. It's taking place at 2 different time periods. And this is not Megacat's fault, by the way. I'm sure Scott caused this. I don't know. I think I'm just going to wait until Return to the Pit comes out, honestly. Since if the Stitch Wraith shows up in that, we know it is important to the story, and not just a random thing. If he shows up and it's also confirmed Into the Pit happens in 2020, then FNaF 3 and 6 have to happen before 2023. This actually makes sense with the new era too. This actually makes sense with a modern story as well. In the FNaF AR emails, Vanessa's username is Ness27. Usually when people have 2 numbers at the end of their username, it's the year they were born. Vanessa is 23 during FNaF AR, which should place the game in 2020. Security breach somewhere in the 2020s too. Although to be fair, 97 could just mean September 7th, since we know Vanessa was born in September, but I still thought it was worth pointing out. Let's say for the sake of argument that FNaF 3 and FNaF 6 are said to take place before 2023. Which year would I think they take place? 2015 or 2017? I'm gonna say 2017, honestly. It just has stronger evidence, I think. Similar wording between the newspapers and Steam description especially, I think. It's very good evidence. It also makes more sense to base the horror attraction on the FNaF 2 locations. It's not only was there a set of murders, but there was a bite too. You know, it's like you get all the Fazbear classics in one location. Honestly, I would prefer FNaF 3 to be earlier in the timeline. It just makes the timeline less cramped, I guess. And also it means the modern game state plays closer to our real world time. If the game is in 2015, William's big return being 30 years after his crowning achievement goes pretty hard. But to be honest, I don't think it really matters when FNaF 3 takes place. It seems that ever since FNaF 4 came out, the game started to take more of a story focus and character focus. The timeline isn't really the focus anymore, which I prefer. I think it makes for a much better story. So the timeline doesn't really matter that much anymore. For example, we still don't really have a good idea of when the new games take place, except like late 2020s, early 2030s range. And we still don't have a year for sister location except after FNaF 1, although I think it takes place probably mid-2010s. So believe whatever you want, I guess. Doesn't really matter. So when does FNaF 3 take place? Certainly 30 years after the closure of a Freddy's. I think besides the FNaF 3 guard, the year FNaF 3 takes place is the only other mystery I'm really stumped on, mostly because Into the Pit broke the timeline. Unlike the FNaF 3 guard though, I'm only gonna have to wait a couple more weeks to get an answer to this question. So please, let me know, when do you think FNaF 3 takes place? Were we right from the start, or have we been wrong for almost a decade now? Tell me in the comments, and while you're down there, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, everyone.